The thick one. Oh shit, you know, all kinds of. What the fuck? Oh hell no. Thousand Eyes Jellyfish. You tell me on what planet, justify it to me, on what planet, on what universe is this a fucking jellyfish? Alright everyone, welcome to the Season 1 finale of By the Box. This one's going to be a little different because the main box that we're going over, Gaia Genesis, does not have a mini box that goes alongside it. Instead, this box kind of acted as the end of the GX or the Fusion era of Duel Links and was immediately followed up by the 5Ds or the Synchro era. And so I'm going to be using the same benchmark to end Season 1 of By the Box, and by extension of that, we're only going to be going over one box today. Immediately following this, I'm going to do essentially a Season 1 recap where I make a tier list and I'm ranking every single card that I put in my categories over the 14 episodes of By the Box in Season 1. And I'm going to be ranking their power level against each other to see what the best cards I talked about overall are. And it also gives me a chance to update some of my opinions on cards that I talked about early on. Maybe I've changed my mind, or maybe I saw potential in them that was squandered eventually, so it gives me a chance to sort of see where some of my opinions have gone from talking about them over the 6 months I've been making this series. And one last thing before I start this video, I apologize, but I really just wanted to give a shout out to my Discord moderators and basically just everyone in my Discord. You guys know who you are, but it's been a phenomenal server, a phenomenal place to be, and I wanted to give a special shout out to Pot of Greed Fan. Pot of Greed Fan is a moderator over at my Discord. He has 1,400 attack points and 1,200 defense points, and he has the effect to draw 2 cards. This makes him a little OP for being a Discord moderator, so instead of being a moderator, I essentially made him my second in command because he does so much over there. Now, he's been phenomenal, and don't let that flashy yellow shit-eating grin fool you. He's a really nice guy, aren't you, you fucking ceramic? Anyway, so let's get into the final box of Season 1, Gaia Genesis. So jumping straight into Gold Sphere, I have a couple of cards. This box in general, there's not as many cards that I'm going to talk about as I initially thought there would be. However, there are some really good ones to talk about, including Drowning Mirror Force. It has the effect that when an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can shuffle all attack position monsters your opponent controls back into the deck. This is one of those, this card's effect is so good that it can end the game by itself type of cards. It has seen widespread play. It is one of the most played trap cards in the history of the game. It's been in so many different decks. To do the card justice is very difficult. It really is incredibly strong. However, what prevents it from being too strong is just the fact that it's a battle trap. And that's to say, this card is only ever live in the battle phase, and even then it has specific restrictions for it to be live in the battle phase, such as your opponent declaring a direct attack and not just an attack. And essentially what this means is during your opponent's main phase 1, they could Mystical Space Typhoon it, Cosmic Cyclone, or pull out something like Atlantean Marksman or Vermilion Dragon Mech, whatever they have to get rid of a card like this that's just sitting on the field while it's not live yet. Its activation window is really small, and it's because of this factor, a lot of battle traps just don't see play. I don't think anyone would deny that Dimensional Prison is a good card, but it doesn't see play like ever just because of this restriction here. And Drowning Mirror Force is actually more restricted than Dimensional Prison. So why is it one of the most played trap cards in the game, whereas every other battle trap, save for Wall of Disruption, just doesn't really see play? And that's just because of its effect. It's that good. Like, the effect is that good, and it warrants these restrictions. It warrants this card having such a small activation window and it being that slow, because that effect is absolutely devastating. Let's say your opponent dumps all of their resources into getting 1 high-level hard-to-get-out main deck monster and 2 extra deck monsters. They clear your field and then they try to attack for game. If you flip this up, then those 2 extra deck monsters are going back to the extra deck, and then that 1 monster that maybe took some resources to get out goes directly back to the deck. It's an instant -2 in card advantage for your opponent, assuming this is the case. And more often than not, if this card resolves, you can win on your next turn. So yeah, this card is like the biggest thing to be scared of when your opponent has a face down card that is not activatable until you attack. It has seen widespread play in so many different decks ever since it came out. It is one of the most played cards in Duel Links, period. And Gold Sphere is a great placement for it, but I will even say it's bordering on Grey Grenade, because once again, it is one of those cards that can win the game by itself if it resolves. It's just not as easy to resolve as something like Haze Grenade or Treacherous Trap Hole, and that's why it's dodged restrictions for its entire life. So yeah, Drowning Mirror Force is stupid strong, and it's in Gold Sphere here. Drowning Mirror Force is obtainable in 2 other ways. It has a bundle deal as well as being in Selection Box Volume 2. So continuing in Gold Sphere, I have a card that I wasn't thinking I was going to put in Gold Sphere, but I think it fits the criteria of everything that I've basically put on the category, and that is going to be Atlantean Heavy Infantry. A super rare in the box, Atlantean Heavy Infantry is a level 2 water sea serpent monster with 0 attack and 1600 defense. He has the effect that during your main phase, you can normal summon a level 4 or lower sea serpent monster in addition to your regular normal summoner set, and it has a weird caveat where you can only gain this effect once per turn, and it's basically to prevent this card from normal summoning itself and then normal summoning another copy and then being able to normal summon another monster from the second copy, which is justified because that effect has that kind of potential to be very nutty and cycling and gain too much advantage. But ironically, it's not its best effect. Its second effect, when this card is sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, you target a face-up card your opponent controls and you destroy it. So there's a ruling in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where if a monster is detached as an Exceed material to activate an Exceed monster's effect, it does not gain its floating effect, even though it's sent from the field to the graveyard. So a good example is actually a card in this box, such as Sangan. Sangan has the effect where if he's sent from the field to the graveyard, you can add a monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck. However, if he was detached from, let's say, Ghost Trick Alucard to destroy a set card, you would not be able to search a card with Sangan's effect just because of this ruling. However, the way that Atlantean Heavy Infantry is worded, it gets over this ruling. In fact, the way the card is worded, it is made directly to accommodate that ruling, since he is hitting the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, such as Abyss Dweller. Abyss Dweller is the boss monster of Water Exceed, where this card sees basically solely and predominant play. Abyss Dweller has the effect to detach an Exceed material from itself to negate all effects in your opponent's graveyard for the turn. This effect is a quick effect, which means you can use it during your opponent's turn and during the battle phase, or really whenever you want. And what this means is if Atlantean Heavy Infantry is Abyss Dweller's material, then you have a quick effect destruction of any face-up card your opponent controls basically on command. So if you set this up turn 1 with some back row, then it's devastating, and it's that kind of cycle and these kinds of play that have made Water Exceed, as I called them in my year recap video, the best rogue deck of 2021, popping in and out of the tier list and competing with the meta here and there. And that story is still basically the same. It just left the tier list again, but it's not unreasonable to say that it would come back, because like I said, Water Exceed has either been right outside the meta or it's joining the meta and then popping back out. It is seriously probably the most consistent rogue deck, and that puts it in a really good position where Water Exceed is a strong deck, but it's not too strong, so it's completely avoided restrictions for its entire life, which has been about a year and a half now, and during that whole time it's been a good deck. And Atlantean Heavy Infantry is a big reason why, because it can be brought out directly from the deck by their best combo starter, Deep Sea Diva. Now I know what you're thinking if you don't know anything about Water Exceed, but Ghost, these dudes, they're only level 2. Abyss Dweller is rank 4. And right you are, and that's where the skill territory, the sharks, comes in. By essentially restricting your deck and extra deck to water monsters, you can make all water monsters you control level 4 for the turn, and you can use this skill twice per duel. So Deep Sea Diva is normal summoned. It'll special summon Heavy Infantry from the deck. You use the skill, that's an Abyss Dweller and a quick effect destruction that you can use whenever you want, maybe on your opponent's combo starter or whatever you can do to disrupt them, making Atlantean Heavy Infantry just an integral part of such a strong deck. So I think Gold Sphere is a very good placement for this unit. And so that's gonna do it for Gold Sphere. We're moving down to Silver Wall, and the first card I'm gonna talk about is Galaxy Cyclone. Galaxy Cyclone is a normal spell. It has the effect to target a set spell or trap on the field and destroy it. And then it has an effect from the graveyard where during your main phase, and this cannot be the turn it was sent to the graveyard, you can banish it from the graveyard to destroy a face-up spell and trap card on the field. And that second effect is a hard once per turn. So this is another card like Night Beam or Cosmic Cyclone, Mystical Space Typhoon, where it's just general, basic, and staple back row removal. And the card did used to be a lot better when the only other option that was debatably better than it was Cosmic Cyclone. And it saw widespread play. It still sees a lot of play, even though it's a lot less so than it used to be. Because of course, the biggest thing working against this card right now is its effect of removing spells and traps is a little too specific, and it's been heavily power crept by Mystical Space Typhoon. The only deck that would prioritize this card over Mystical Space Typhoon or Cosmic Cyclone is the archetype that it's kind of in Photons. Photon decks, the skill that they use, they can add this card directly from their deck to their hand, making this card's situational aspect a lot more accessible, because a situational card is made pretty good if you can decide when to bring it into your hand or when to put it on the field for the situation it'll work in. Because sometimes the card you want to get rid of is a face-up spell and trap card that your opponent controls, and then when it's in the graveyard, it's probably going to be a set spell or trap card that you want to destroy. And even with that graveyard effect, like let's say you wanted to get rid of Necro Valley. Necro Valley would prevent Galaxy Cyclone from activating its effect at all. However, the card is still a staple. It's still played a whole bunch, and it's played as a substitute if you don't have 3 Mystical Space Typhoon or Cosmic Cyclone or any other better spell and trap removal alternative. And the fact that it is the spell and trap removal of choice for a rogue deck gives it a little bit of credence too. Initially, I was actually thinking I was going to put this in Gold Sphere, but the more I looked at it, just how hard it's been power crept, I don't think I can justify it, but it still is a really good card. So continuing in Silver Wall, this one's going to be really quick because it's Atlantean Marksman. Atlantean Marksman's second effect is exactly the same as Heavy Infantry's, except he targets and destroys a set card on the field. But then his first effect is different. If he inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you special summon a level 4 lower Atlantean Sea Serpent type monster from your deck, except another copy of himself. So this first effect will seldom ever come up because typically you're not going to be attacking with this card during the battle phase, but really it's just that second effect. However, it is significantly worse in Heavy Infantry's, and that's simply because disruption is more important than destruction. And that is to say, being able to use Heavy Infantry to disrupt your opponent's combo starter or to get rid of their boss monster on their turn, compared to Marksman clearing out back row during your opponent's end phase or your main phase, it's just not as good. And Water Exceed typically runs Mystical Space Typhoon anyway, but they can run less copies of it just because they are running Marksman, which they typically do at 1 copy, but some builds of Water Exceed don't use him at all. However, this card can make the difference in the game a lot of the time. You know, being able to get rid of something like Drowning Mirror Force. And talking about Galaxy Cyclone, Atlantean Marksman is essentially a quick effect Galaxy Cyclone when it's a material for Abyss Dweller. It's just not as optimal or as necessary in Heavy Infantry. I don't see a Water Exceed deck working without Heavy Infantry, but I think one could work with Marksman. But all the praise I gave for Heavy Infantry and Water Exceed, this all applies to Marksman too, so I think Silver Wall is a good placement for him. And then this is my last card in Silver Wall, and the last card for the Season 1 finale, and it's gonna be one of the cute boys, Swap Frog. Swap Frog is a level 2 Agua water monster with 1,000 attack and 500 defense points. He has the effect that he can special summon himself by discarding a water monster, and then when he is summoned, you can send a level 2 or lower Aqua monster from your deck or the face-up field to the graveyard. And then on a soft once per turn, you can return a monster you control to the hand, and then you can normal summon a frog monster during your main phase, except Swap Frog in addition to your normal summoner set. So that effect is actually very similar to heavy infantry's because he has the same caveat where you can only gain that effect once per turn. So this card is really good in Monarch Tribute decks, or otherwise known as Treeborn Tribute. This is essentially a deck that specializes in tribute summoning the monarchs who have really good effects when they're tribute summoned to disrupt your opponent, clear out their field, and go for game. And Swap Frog is one of the biggest facilitators of them being able to bring out the monarchs so seamlessly, and it pairs very well with its frog brethren Treeborn Frog that I have also talked about in By the Box episodes before. Now these monarch decks aren't super strong, but they pop in and out of play. You'll see them hit King of Games, you'll see them go on win streaks, you'll see them do some things that you just wouldn't expect them to do. Making use of cards like Simorg of Darkness and Dark Dusk Spirit makes the deck pretty gimmicky, but also really cool and really fun, and Swap Frog is an integral part of these decks. And so if it was just that, I think I would put him in Bronze Weapon, but the reason he's in Silver Wall is, once again, the aspect of potential. Probably one of the strongest Exceed monsters in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a rank 2 called Totally Awesome. Totally Awesome synergizes with the Frog archetype and is unofficially a part of it, and cards like Swap Frog would absolutely be used in a deck that specializes around Totally Awesome to bring him out, because Swap Frog is one of the best materials that there possibly could be for Totally Awesome. And in that case scenario, this card, especially with some of the Paleozoic cards, could be really ridiculously strong. So Swap Frog has a ton of potential, and it's already a pretty dang good card for its own right. So some stray thoughts, UA and Kawaki Miru are both in this box to a heavy degree. There are so many cards to each archetype in this box, and in my 9 decks to build in the half-off gem sale, one of them I talked about was Ultra Athletes UA, because you can obtain the vast majority of that deck through this box alone. And I just want to say they are right outside my categories. Like, they are right there, especially with UA midfielder, and I kind of feel bad for not putting them in the categories, but just how little and inconsistently they compete, I just don't know if I can really justify it. And then that's kind of where the aspect of potential comes in again. I don't see much potential for Ultra Athletes in the future. I just think they're going to continue to get power crept. And the same goes for Kakimiru, despite their recent limited restrictions, and even though Kakimiru Urnite is in here, which I would argue is the best card in the archetype, they are once again just right outside my categories. Like, I kind of feel bad for not putting them in, and I also feel bad that I didn't talk about Kyakumiru in that 9 decks to build during the half-off gem sale video. However, it's another case where they just don't consistently compete, and I just think they're going to get worse and worse as the game goes on. Even though recently I was playing a meta deck, I can't remember which one, but it was a meta deck, and I got the shit kicked out of me by Kyakumiru, so I learned what they can still do. But it's just, yeah, those factors working against them. They're just going to be right outside the category, but they are to note that the majority of their archetypes are in this box. I think you can say the same thing about Sangan. He's right outside the categories, but I was kind of astonished to see how little he's played and how little he's been played. And the fact that an archetype like Burning Abyss and Phantom Knights have come out and they just don't even want to try to utilize this card whatsoever is kind of telling. It's just because of that errata effect that happened so long ago. It's just way too slow to make use of it. Again, despite it being a level 3 Fiend Dark monster, you'll never catch a Burning Abyss player dead with it in their deck. And so lastly, we will go over the poster boy, Elemental Hero Gaia. Elemental Hero Gaia is a level 6 Earth Warrior fusion monster with 2200 attack and 2600 defense. His first effect is just a restriction where he must be fusion summoned and can't be special summoned by other ways. Because he's so overwhelmingly powerful, he absolutely needs a restriction to his summoning, despite the fact that he is really easy to bring out because his materials are any elemental hero monster and any earth monster. And with really good cards in the game like Elemental Hero Solid Soldier that will be run in at least a few variants of hero decks, going into Gaia really isn't a big deal. And his effect is, when he's fusion summoned, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls until the end phase. Its attack is halved, and then that lost attack will go to Gaia. So it is essentially a rear Yoku on legs, which is not a good card. Of course, you don't have to tribute 2 monsters to use this effect, but it's also just a significantly worse Dark Rebellion Exceed Dragon, which hero decks would easily be able to go into because of how many level 4 monsters they run. And on top of that, despite the fact that that effect isn't terrible, like it could be a lot worse, there's just no way where any hero player on the planet could justify putting this card in one of their 7 extra deck slots over the myriad of other hero fusion monster options that they have, or really good rank 4s that they have, like Heroic Challenger Excalibur, or Dark Rebellion Exceed Dragon, or Utopia Ray. There's just way better options than this card. And it has a restriction that it doesn't need to its summoning condition, and while its effect isn't terrible, it's, again, power crept, and at a starting baseline of 2200, it's not super great either. So yeah, it's bad. Okay, holy shit, I am astonished. Don't listen to this if you don't like my rambling. Just end the video. Go. Whoo! We done did it. 14 episodes of By the Box. I can't believe it. It's awesome. This is my favorite series for sure. It's probably my favorite type of video to make. I always have a blast making these. I always have a blast talking about them and, you know, going through the feedback and everything. It's always a lot of fun. But yeah, man, this is just kind of a benchmark for me, I guess, a little bit to reflect on the fact that I've made 67 videos, which is weird and nuts to me that I've done that many. And I've done 14 of this one series that just popped up in my head one day, you know, when I first started the channel, like, what can I do for a video? And I ended up just loving doing this series. And what's funny is before my channel got a little more traction, these were my least popular videos by far. Like, no one watched these. But then when my channel blew up, like, everyone went back to Buy the Box, and now, like, all of them are some of my most viewed videos on the channel. And the feedback I've gotten from this series has been better than anything else on my channel outside of the magnum opus gem guide, of course. But just the amount of people that have told me this series helps them as a player has been so heartwarming to me, and I feel it for myself too. Like, me doing this series has made me a better player. I definitely feel that. So yeah, we're gonna keep doing this regardless. Maybe I'll go over to, you know, Master Duel content strictly someday, or, you know, wherever my channel goes with Yu-Gi-Oh further. This is a series I'm going to continue, and with boxes continuously being released in Duel Links, I'll kind of get to keep doing it for a while. And despite the fact that we've talked about 29 boxes, we're still well behind, so we got a lot of this series left to do. But this is the end of season 1. I appreciate everyone that has been watching this series and has been watching my videos in general, supporting me, subscribing to the channel, and everything, being active over at the Discord. Seriously, you guys are the best. I try to say it as much as I can because it really does mean a lot to me. Well, so, let's watch out for that tier list video, because I think I'm gonna have a lot of fun making that. And you crazy cats, have a good day. I will see you in my next video.